Kwe, bon après-midi, hi. This is so good to see you, like, wow, there's still some people. I think you should be like more in the first row though, yeah. So if anyone feels compelled to be next to those beautiful ladies, full of knowledge and wisdom and rage, then come on here. My name is Vanessa. I will be hosting this discussion that is called Telling Stories, Changing the World. But before I do that, I'm going to speak French to say thank you to people that has money and give it to us. Donc, cette activité est présentée en codiffusion par Kwahiatonhk et la Maison de la littérature dans le cadre du 14e Salon du livre des Premières Nations, une présentation d'Hydro-Québec. Réalisée par Kwahiatonhk, l'édition 2025 est rendue possible grâce à l'appui financier des partenaires suivants. Desjardins, Innergex Énergie renouvelable, OKT Law, Week-end 91.9 FM, le Conseil des arts du Canada, le gouvernement du Canada, le gouvernement du Québec, la SODEC, la Ville de Québec, l'Organisation internationale de la Francophonie et Wendake. That being done, whoa. Yeah. That's a big whoa. I am beyond excited to just share the stage with you, and I can't wait for you to tell us about those stories that can indeed change the world. For the people that are just in front of us, I will just very quickly introduce you, because like we could do an introduction for an hour with those amazing writers and women. So Julie is a Mi'kmaq storyteller, photographer, actor, drummer, best-selling author, and the first Indigenous poet laureate of PEI, which is so wonderful. Congratulations. Through her books, songs, poetry, and other creative pursuits, Julie celebrates and shares the powerful stories of the Mi'kmaq on PEI. And then we have Michelle, which is a writer of Cree ancestry and a member of the Red Pheasant Cree Nation in Saskatchewan. And her debut novel, Five Little Indians, won so many prizes. Like, the list is very long. And anyway, I am quite sure you've read it already, and perhaps if not, then you just cross the street and you go buy it after this discussion. But also, I wanted to say that she was a finalist for the 2023 Beasley Prize for Public Policy for Truth-Telling 7 Conversation about Indigenous Life in Canada. So we will be talking about stories and how they can be actions in this world. You have 2 very different books if we talk about like the one that were given to me for this. It's a long split between those 2. So maybe for the sake of the public, you could like very shortly just introduce the book, and then we'll go on with the discussion. Maybe Julie, if you want to start with the ghost stories of PEI.
Thank you so much. Now, this is one of my newer books that I had put together with a group of my friends, and we had been realizing the immense knowledge in the stories that our elders held, and Halloween was coming, and I thought, what if we went out and met with our elders all across PEI and asked them for their scary stories, you know, the ones that make the hair on your arms stand up? And so they all love to scare us, so it was very easy, and we had many, many cups of tea, and sat and wrote down all of these stories, and we created volume 1. And since we have finished that book, we are now still getting phone calls and text messages saying, Julie, you need to stop by. I remembered another story. And so everybody is really anxious for us to get into book 2. And CBC actually loves that we did this, because now they have like an Indigenous perspective on Halloween that they can showcase every year. They say, Julie, come on, we need you to share one of your Halloween stories. And it's like, okay, the tone shifts to a long time ago. And I had so much fun, and the stories were so deep and so nurturing, and they really tell us who we are as a people. And other people who read it who don't have that worldview will still get a scare, and they'll still enjoy the scary stories. But if you are Indigenous, you're going, I know what she's talking about there. I know exactly where she's going with this story, because all the stories are about saving a core of truth, that little kernel that's inside every story that allows us to expand and grow in everything we do. So that is the gift of the Ghost Stories book, and I absolutely love it, and it's so much fun.
Thank you, Julie. Michelle, would you like to introduce your book? Or
Sure.
Yeah.
After Five Little Indians came out, I was working on another novel. But then there was this tremendous response, and a response that completely blindsided me. I was completely surprised by the amazing response to Five Little Indians. And mostly what got me was the reader responses. I still get emails from readers talking about how the book impacted them and prompted them to reconsider what they thought they understood about residential schools and about the impacts of those schools and how those impacts are generational in nature. And so I thought, aha, here, here we have an opening, here is an opportunity. And so I decided instead to put together my little book of essays, Truth-Telling, 7 Conversations about Indigenous Life in Canada, because I thought there was an opening. People are indicating to me that they're willing to reconsider what they think they know, that they're willing to do the work, the heavy lifting. And so I thought, well, here's some stuff for you to give some consideration to about the true history of Canada. Because if we're to get anywhere at all in this world, in this country, in this relationship that we have between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, we must first get to the truth. And to get to the truth, we must get under the myth of Canadian history, because it's a myth. What you're taught in school is a big fairy tale. And it's time that we understood our history accurately.
Thank you. And I so love the fact that you're going for truth within stories, which usually we tell, stories are not exactly truth.
Well, it's interesting because I really take the position that everything is a story. The whole world is a story. I mean, prior to embarking on my writing career and having my first book published at 64, I was a lawyer, and I find that to be a perfect example of how everything is a story. You stand in a courtroom and you have one side that tells a story to the judge, you have another side that tells a story to the judge, and you hope that your story is the most persuasive. Everything is a story. So let's tell our own story, let's tell the truth, let's engage in a truth-finding process.
Even before the writing in truth-telling, there is this quote of John Trudell.
John Trudell, yes.
John Trudell, sorry, thank you. That is very accurate and very beautiful, and this person was so important in so many levels throughout the American Indian movement. I will read it, and then I've got questions for both of you. That says, when one lives in a society where people can no longer rely on the institutions to tell them the truth must come from culture and art. I think you partly answered this already, but I was curious in what way this statement reveals your book, and also the way you stand between a fine line of fiction and action, maybe?
Well, one of the things that I also have said many times is truth is more than fact, okay? Truth is a much broader concept. And, I had a choice when I was writing about Five Little Indians, because the impetus to write that book was when I was representing survivors, and there was all this media, all these press stories about the settlement agreement, and then you get all the commentary about people, why can't they just get over it? Why can't they just get over it? And it was infuriating. I was just furious, and I thought, okay, you want to know why they can't just get over it. I'm going to answer that question. And that's what I set out to do in Five Little Indians. I could have done that as a complete nonfiction book. I could have just done interviews, I could have done research, I could have written it just as a factual account, okay? But my decision was, which is going to be more impactful? Something that is encased in an artistic story, or something that is a dry analysis of dates and locations and names and numbers and so on. And I chose fiction because it actually gives people an out, okay, where they can say, oh, it's just fiction. It's just fiction. But by the time they get into it a little bit, it's got them. And the truth of it has got them, and so they can't say it's just fiction anymore. So, as I say, truth is more than fact, and we can represent truth, we can articulate truth through poetry, through painting, through fiction, through essay, whichever way we choose. But art is a loud, loud voice.
It is very powerful.
Yeah.
Maya Kuznimolen, that was just on the stage this morning, says it's through stories that you can talk about stuff that is way harder and that you can actually have people believe what you're saying. I was also, I don't know, I felt like I wanted to ask you, Julie, to answer to this quote in the way that as a performer, I was thinking, what is it about performing stories and bringing the words off the pages that gives the story power? So maybe you can just answer, John, on that matter.
Our next generation doesn't seem to be as I was. I'm 55. I look back at my childhood, and most of my time was with my face in a book and being able to go to these faraway places and to do all these amazing things. But when I look at my children and my grandchildren, it's really hard to get them engaged in reading. And so when I decided to start a theater group in 2011, it was a way for them to get actively involved in the stories and present them to Indigenous communities, non-Indigenous communities, and we travel all over PEI and Atlantic Canada, and I've traveled to Scotland with our stories, we've traveled to France with our stories, and we've been able to showcase these stories in an active way. And I feel that resonates with the young people, because when we first started working with them and we were talking to them and they were like, I didn't even know these stories before. But once you get them acting out, we have one called Little Scarface, and it is a story that is sort of universal all across North America. And it's about this young girl who believes in herself, and she finds love because of that belief. And when I read the story and I brought it to the young people, and really, it was a Cinderella before Disney, before Disney. We had that already duct taped in with Little Scarface and in the beauty of it. And so now they're able to embrace their stories and share them with a lot of pride. And so being able to take it to the next level and to be able to share it and showcase our young people learning these stories, being able to actively sing and dance in Mi'kmaq, and to be able to do all these beautiful things. When I look at our elders watching our young people when they're doing these things, and I see such a pride, because I know that a lot of them didn't have that same opportunity. I know I didn't have that opportunity growing up. And to be able to see their young people doing this, it just, their hearts just grow with pride to be able to see this and to be able to see the changes in the world that are happening. And although the changes are slow, if you stick around long enough, you can see that these changes are happening.
Do you disagree?
I do disagree with something.
Yeah, go on.
And that is,
we can disagree.
Slow. It's not slow. If you look at, I love history. I got a new novel coming out, yet another historical fiction. If you look at the changes that have happened, and I'm an old lady now, right, so I can say this. I started with activism in the 1970s, and some of the things that we have accomplished now would have been unthinkable in the 1970s. And when you think about that in the context of the historical moment, it's a blink, it's a snap of a finger in terms of history. And if we can continue to render changes at that rate, right? I mean, the whole world is going to be magnificently different in another heartbeat. And, you know, I would, like, things that I read, things that I see, the rights that we've accrued, the voice that we've been able to raise, it would have been unthinkable in the 70s. We would have been beat up and thrown out, right? It's like, you know, really. And that's happened in what is historically just an incredible short period of time. Everything else, I agree.
Well, to continue on this idea, one thing that I really love about your work, Julie, is that when we think of PEI literature, most of us, what do you think about? Yeah, Anne of Green Gables, exactly. Donc, Anne la Maison au Pignon Vert. And I thought this is so amazing and so cool that now we have this book that tells story not only through the voices of elders, but also like where there is location, and now you can go back to this territory, this land, and say, oh, now I know a different version, which goes back to what is beneath the Canadian story, what is underneath. And I was curious to ask you, Julie, which, if you were to pick one, which is really hard, I know, you can pick more. You don't have to listen to like what I'm saying. So if you were to pick one, which Mi'kmaq story should we tell across Canada? Which one should be known? What should we know about the Mi'kmaq in PEI?
Oh my goodness, that's a really hard one. Like, I mean, there's so many stories. My brain just sort of went into overdrive for about 2 seconds. But honestly, if I were to distill all of the stories, it's really, I went and started researching creation in Mi'kmaq context. And I went and talked to elders in our community. I went into the archives to find everything that was written. And I started to create the first version, volume 1 of 1,000,000, because creation is a creation of everything. So, I mean, you could never, ever do that in one sitting, or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. But the very, very first one, and when I think of Chief Justice Murray Sinclair and the work that he did with the Truth and Reconciliation, and I think of the fact that if you ever go to the website, like on the very front page, it has him speaking, and he says, every child in the world has the right to know where they came from. Every child. And we did not have that in PEI for the longest time. We had the versions that were being passed down, and they weren't our stories. And so I went and I talked to the elders, and I started to create this version, this Mi'kmaq version of our creation. And in this version, we have the creator, and he created Glooscap, and Glooscap came and lived with us and taught us everything we needed to know. And then when he created us to be just like him. We were strong. We were very easy. We could think well. We could do all of these amazing things. And when I say these first starts of the creation story, the children know that they were created to be exactly who they are. And it gives them a sense of pride knowing that that is part of their story. And there's 1,000,000 other stories that come in terms of creation, but we always start with the creation of the universe, the creation of the galaxies, the creation of Earth, the creation of Abagwit or PEI, and then the creation of our people that live there. And that just gives them a sense of who they are in space and time and gives them that pride. And we didn't have that for so long. And I know even some of our elders today didn't even have that. So being able to capture that and share it is beautiful and relevant, even still today.
One thing, when I said that there's a split between those two books, and I've been trying really hard to have like this conversation going between the two of you, because I mean, a good animation is someone that doesn't talk and you get to talk, and then I do nothing. That means I sparked something good. So I'm going to try something about the matriarch figure. It's been said many times that they are the one making truth happens. And I feel like, Michelle, you are very efficient in the way you address problem and solution, and active solution to those problems. And in French literature, well, Québec literature, Indigenous Québec literature, that is like there's a whole politic problem there in the phrasing. But most of the women carry this legacy of their nation throughout the writing, when often men goes for fiction, for novels, instead of poetry that can be like very direct, or essays. And so I feel that in your position, not only because the state in life you're in, but also having those very big successes, like how do you feel, not how, but do you feel a particular like responsibility through your community as women, as writer? Is that something that is in your mind when you write those stories, or it's just you and the page and your mind?
Yeah.
Well, that was that. Thank you for coming.
I wouldn't really say that I specifically think, I'm, a Nahio woman, I'm a Cree woman, and therefore I must do. I think it's just written on the hard drive, and this new novel that I've I've just finished, and it'll be out in August. And I didn't really intend it this way, but what it's become is 3 generations of Cree women telling the history from the time prior to sort of the colonial efforts in Saskatchewan, or what was called the Northwest Territories then. So from 1856 right up to 1980 is basically the period of time that it covers. But it's a grandmother telling the story of the difficult times, of the times of great destruction, to her granddaughter to give her the strength to survive residential schools. And then it's that daughter telling that story to her daughter to give her the strength to find her own place in a modern world, right, in a changing world. And so it became a story about matriarchs telling stories, and the importance of story, the importance of oral history, and the importance of remembering. And so, I think it's just, for many of us, I could be wrong, I was once, I think it's just in the hard drive. I think it's just part of how we're created, but that's just me.
Do you have the same conception about it? Because I feel like the work I've read from you is very driven.
Yes, I think that telling stories is the same. It's something that it's intrinsic. It's deep inside. It's something that I've always done. My mother passed away when I was 3.5, and my father decided to join the ministry so that he would be able to be in heaven with her when he finally passes. And he's still alive, thank goodness. Keep knocking on wood. And we went to Queen's Theological College when I was very young, and he went and got his university degree in theology, and he had churches we went all the way out to Grandview, Manitoba, to Stony Mountain, to Pinawa, to Brandon, and in every church, I was the one who looked after the children during the service. At 8 years old, I was like, okay, I'm going to tell you a story. We need to be quiet because my dad's upstairs and he's going to get mad at me. And I had to come up with the best, most elaborate stories so that I would entertain these children for an hour every Sunday. And it was just my role. And I jumped into it with both feet and my full heart. And now my dad says, do you still go to church? And I said, you had 3 churches every Sunday. And every Sunday I went for 3 times, and I looked after all those kids. And I said, I think I have some banked time. and he actually totally agrees with me. So, well, maybe that was like 15, 20 years ago I stopped and I turned more to my own spirituality. But at that same time, he was like, yeah, you have bank time, you're good. And it was just something that I always did. It was like the entertainment portion of it. And then secondly, it was I needed to make sure that the children learned something. And then all of a sudden when I started going to school and I would start writing, and I think I was 9 years old, and I said, I want a Smith Cornea typewriter for Christmas. You know, the one with the little package?
Did you get it?
I got it.
I got one too.
And that was the start of a whole new life, wasn't it?
Exactly.
You were unstoppable. You had the corrector ribbon, you slide it in, and you go back, and you can put A, B, whatever you mistyped, and then it would look like it was just erased from the page. And then it was amazing, because then I could put all these thoughts down and I wouldn't lose them, and I wouldn't, put them away. Like, it would be something that I could keep. So storytelling has always been inside me, and I think for some of us, it's just always been there.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
I love how you make the story having a body through the typing, like it being an action, and circling back to this idea of like, can stories change the world? I was curious to hear you both on how stories can be actions and not only stories, because in your book you invite us to have conversation after the book, outside of the book, so be it together, really together.
Yeah. Well, and what are stories but actions? Can it be something other than action? I think not, right? It's an action, it inspires, right? And I don't really want to go there, but I will. There is this whole dialogue about, I won't put it in that pretendian context, but there's this whole dialogue about, can you separate the artist from the art? And I think not, because I think that you are putting your imperative in the work that you do. There is a purpose of why you're doing it. You're not doing it because you like the way, the typeface looks on the page. You're doing it for a very specific reason, to inspire very specific action. And so, no, I don't think you can separate the artist from the art. Yeah.
I don't think that either.
Yeah. That's funny about the typewriter. I think I was about 9, and I got this typewriter for Christmas, and it was like, oh. And I've often said that I think writers are born, not made, right? That there is a nature to observe, consider, and record, and I think it's something that we're gifted with when we come to the earth. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything you want to echo to on this? I can go on.
Oh no, it's really true. It is. I think we are literally just born to it. And if you have somebody who doesn't have that same thought process, and you say, tell us a story, and they go, well, what story do you want? With us, we could just instantly say, well, this morning I got up, and the hotel guy was banging on the door to clean my room. Everything becomes a story instantly. Yeah. Everything, every aspect, every exchange that we get to have, all of those things have a beauty in our minds that we could sort of create something beautiful with it.
You were talking about this book that you just finished, Michelle, and Rachel McCrum told me a lot about it too.
Okay.
We want to read it, like we're ready to read it.
Sorry, you gotta wait till August.
And you just said that, and I do agree, as a writer, I do agree with this, that stories sometimes comes to us, but then we decide what we make of them.
Oh yeah.
And I'm curious about this specific story to come. What did you put in that? Because in this book, in the truth telling, it's conversations, and it's fiction, but then it's very...
No, it's not fiction.
Well, yes, it's not fiction, but then it's put in a way that you think it is, to compel you to go through them and to have to revise your vision of the world, I would say. So what is your intention in those stories to come, in those matriarchs? Because there's so many ways to be passing stories from one generation to another, but it's one thing to be doing that in a book, but then how do you do that from the book to the readers?
Okay. Well, maybe I said it, maybe I didn't. It's a novel in 3 parts, okay? And so the first part is about, my great-grandmother. She was there when, I don't know how many people are familiar with the Frog Lake so-called massacre. She was there. And this was as a result of the starvation policies by Sir John A. Macdonald, and they just, the warriors just got fed up and they killed a bunch of people. And so the Northwest Mounted Police chased them across the border into Montana, so I still have relations in Montana. But all of that arose from the starvation of Indigenous people, arose from the decimation of the buffalo. And there is what I did before each part of the book, part 1, part 2, part 3, was I put a little quotation to, inspire some thought about what's the point of all of this. And I didn't bring it because I'm a ding-dong. Oh, no, I did.
I would love for you to see the notes. You can see the many, many years of being a lawyer, and you can see it is so precise. Those notes are incredible.
So the note, and part of this is because, people talk about the decimation of the buffalo, and they say, oh yeah, they killed off all the buffalo. And then they stop thinking about it there. They might go as far as, yes, we understood the buffalo was food, clothing, and shelter. But they just stop there, okay? And they don't think about the intentionality of it. So the quote that I used at the beginning of part 1 of the new novel is this: "Let them kill, skin, and sell until the buffalo are exterminated. Then your prairies can be covered with speckled cattle and festive cowboys. Every dead buffalo is an Indian gone." And that's by U.S. General Philip Sheridan. And, when Lewis and Clark came across the country, across the U.S., they reported back that they came across herds of buffalo that were so vast that they couldn't see the horizon beyond them. 10 years later, when they came back, they didn't see one buffalo, not one. And this is not limited to the States. The buffalo didn't know a border. There were over 4 million buffalo that were exterminated in Canada for the same purpose. How many people knew that bone china was made from buffalo bones? How many people knew that Regina, the capital of Saskatchewan, used to be called Pile of Bones? Google it, and you'll see this huge pile of buffalo bones with a man standing next to it that looks this big. And so it decimated everything that we relied on for our food, our medicines, our homes, our clothing, our tools, everything. And so put us in a position where we could be completely oppressed, and we could be forced into agreements that have not served us well. And so that's what the first part of this novel is about. And then the second part is the advent of the residential school system, and it's grandmother telling the story to my mother. It's based on my mother's life, and to give her strength. But one of the themes in the second part, my mother was born in 1921. And Frantz Fanon, who is a great writer about colonialism and the impacts of colonialism, he posits a theory, and I suggest that it's correct, that the colonizer manages to convince the colonized that the more you behave as the colonizer behaves, the more that you live as the colonizer lives, the safer you will be in the world that you live in. And this is, I think it's a little controversial, but people of my generation, and my mother was certainly this way, they figured if they can just be as white as they can be, they're going to be safe. My mother didn't just survive residential school, she survived 3 years in a TB sanatorium. So, I can understand that way of thinking. But then we come to the next generation, and she births herself a rebel daughter who's determined to find her indigeneity again. And she is telling her story to her daughter to protect her, and it does protect her, but it also inspires her to return to and to understand her own indigeneity and her own history. So that's my intent. Yeah.
Yeah, now I want to read it, definitely. I feel like you are a very brave person, bold person, and I am curious about this. are there any stories that you are somehow afraid to approach? And that's a story, that's a question I want to ask you both.
No.
Okay, so we had yes, and now we have no. Good. Maybe Julie, do you want
I'm older. I know I'm going to probably be dead in 10 years, so I'm fearless.
I love that.
Yeah, my father always says, don't publish anything about me until after I'm gone. That's, and it's sort of, a written, unspoken thing that I've done, except for the stuff that he allows me to publish, like the ghost story ones. Our house on Lennox Island in Prince Edward Island was haunted, and it was haunted by Father McGinnis, who lived in that same house for so long. He would sit in the front window and watch the community unfold throughout the week, and then every Saturday morning bang on everybody's doors and say, go to church, it's time. And when he died in that house, and he stayed in that house. And so my father's allowing me to share that story because he said, yeah, he remembers that well. But there's a lot of other stories that he says, just wait, just wait. It'll happen. You can write whatever you want after I'm gone, because then I'm fine. And I said, okay. But he's the only one I'm afraid
that's
of.
Not fear.
It's love.
That's not fear, it's respect.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
It's
different.
respecting your father's wishes.
Exactly.
And that's a different thing.
And that's a big different thing.
Yeah.
It is, but there are some places I feel like as writers that we fear. Sometimes, well, you don't, definitely. I do. And some other writers sometimes are just like, I don't feel like I'm ready there yet to go to this space. Like, I know as a writer, I feel like sometimes we know we have to get to this story. Yeah. It's just how long would it take me to approach it and feel like I can tell it because I can face it, maybe. But I love that you don't fear that, and I will just take it from you. There is something very interesting you decided to do with the Ghost Stories of PEI that I really liked, is that, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel like you really changed the way people talk, or you did like an editing job. It's just you take the way people talk, the way they tell the story, and if they're not really good storytellers, then the story is just like, that was a story, and it goes a little but then the story is consigned in the book, and I was curious to hear it talk about this decision.
Yeah, there was a lot of times that my editor would say, do you want to change that wording? And I'd be like, no, because eventually this will make it back into their hands, and they trust me with their story that they're gifting me to honor it and to make sure that it is shared in the spirit that it was given. And yes, I have a responsibility to preserve those stories, even if sometimes the nuances get lost in translation. Like, you don't have the elder's eyes, the eyebrows go up and they say, and then. It doesn't translate quite as well, but it still preserves the story, and their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, they'll be able to read the words from these elders for forever now. They're going to be locked in and saved and preserved, and they will always be there. And so I always have to keep that in mind, and it is written in that way that they had given it to me, even though, as you said, some of them are not quite as elaborate. Or, I mean, I had one elder going, there was a witch in the tree 6 feet up in the air when I rode my bike around the corner. There it was. And then I looked and I stared, and my mouth dropped open, and I looked behind me, and all my friends were gone. And I was like, where did they go? And it's like, I need to leave too. And that's how they told it to me. But when you were there sitting with him and he's telling you, and you have this vision of this ghost in the air picking apples from the apple grove, and I'm going, yes, I would have been afraid too. I would have had the exact same experience. And then you have others that are so eloquent and just natural storytellers, and you just go with that as well. But you had to include it as is.
I really love that at sometimes it felt like I was just sitting with my uncles. You know, my moms, we call them uncles, but really it's our moms or sometimes grandparents' uncles, and everyone is just an uncles, and they tell those stories and they're like, yeah, but men's a few words. And sometimes I could feel that some elders were men's a few words in those stories. Time is flying by and we'll have to end this soon, but this time is stupid. I said it yesterday. Time is stupid. It's a concept I don't quite like.
I just wanted to note that, you raise, this raises a really important issue, and that is that we need more Indigenous editors. Okay, because Indigenous editors.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because I ran into this with Five Little Indians a little bit, not much, because I just said, forget about it, right? But, just saying, my characters do not speak like middle-class white people, okay? There is a whole way of, it's like a language that's English, but it's different. And being able to have editors that can understand that language and the power of it is very important. We're starting to get there. David Robertson is running his own imprint. Katarina Vermette is an editor now, so we're getting there, but we need more. Yeah.
I do agree on that. I just wanted to quickly ask you, circling back to this idea of change that is both slow and really quick within how the story of Indigenous people are being told and heard. You write this beautiful line, Michelle. You said, you talk about this idea of lighting a fire to engage
fire,
yes, with the ancestor, and that the fire remains as long as we're not done with the conversation. And then you said, let us keep the flame alive until truth overturns the colonial life. Do you feel
the colonial lie?
Yeah, sorry, lie, which is a big difference, but also entangle. Do you feel like this fire will end at some point? Do you feel like we're going to see the end of it?
We can hope. And without hope, we're hopeless. Yeah. I think it was Raymond Williams who said the most radical thing that you can do is to choose hope over despair.
Then let's choose hope and stories. And then let's keep this conversation going. And the conversation will be going on the other side of the street at the Morin Center, where those beautiful writers will be signing books and keeping the discussion with you. And then I'm going to just quickly switch to French to tell you that this is time to go at the book fair at the Morin Center. But then please come back, because Michel Jean, just over there, is going to be hosting I said I would do it in French and I'm doing it in English. Anyway, Michel Jean va diriger une conversation très passionnante, en fait, qui s'appelle « Puiser l'inspiration dans l'histoire et le territoire » avec un genre de all-star panel. Donc, Marie-André Gill, Isabelle Picard, Marie-Josée Bastien. C'est la dernière rencontre qui aura lieu dans le cadre du 14e Salon du livre des Premières Nations. Je vous invite à rester. Je vous remercie beaucoup pour votre écoute. Michelle, Julie, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, you too.